Your favorite fish. Hey world, Ron Motter here with good friends, uh, Avishil and Martin. They'll be introducing themselves shortly. And this is the wonderful fish of the day. Uh, Hopefully not served at any restaurant. Martin, can you tell us what this fish is?
Coelacanth, Latimeria chelumna, which was sort of indigenous to the Indian Ocean, and best of my knowledge, well, we know the first one was found and described for science in 1938. It was found by fishermen off the Comores, and it was brought to the attention of a South African ichthyologist by the name of J.L.B. Smith, who went on to author went on to write the seminal work on the fishes of Southern Africa. My copy came directly from his family. It was a gift from them, and my copy is from the 1960s. It was first, I think, it was first published in 1949. The coelacanth was, for many years, considered only to come from the Comores, and more recently, they found colonies in South Africa and Indonesia. So it's pretty widespread around.
Is the fish still endangered?
Do you know, Ron, I'm not speaking with any authority, but from my readings, I think the answer is yes. But the thing is, the ocean is so big, and I think that this is a very important point on Wildlife Day. The ocean is so big that we've really literally only, tickled the surface of our knowledge of it. So it may or it may not be. You mentioned restaurants, though. It's not edible. Although apparently it is, I think, for its medicinal value, but it's a very oily fish. And I believe it makes you very sick if you eat, which is good because it grows to about 1.8 meters, I think. And it is just the most beautiful fish. When you see it, I haven't personally seen it, unfortunately. They live at a depth of 100 meters and more. When you see it on the video, it is, I'll try and pull one up for you during our conversation. It's the most beautiful fish because of all its fins going at different angles and different times. It looks like a one-animal ballet underwater. And it's such a beautiful animal. It's very, very dark blue with white spots.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Abhishek, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your favorite wildlife?
Right. My name is Abhishek Bell, and I head and run Wild Navigator Travels, based in Edinburgh. But today, my travels focus on the Indian subcontinent, so India, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. Currently, I'm speaking from India, so you will see me cutting off in between because my internet is very, very slow. But thankfully, if it does run, it's perfect for the World Wildlife Day. Yes, so yeah, it's running wildlife conservation and conservation tours. That's the main focus. I've just come into India on three days back, so things are a bit different from Scotland. It's a bit warmer to start with, and I'll be heading to a bird park soon, to Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary. So hopefully I'm looking forward to that, seeing some migratory bird species, which is the focus. Yeah, and it's today, the good thing is it's 1 year to Wild Navigator, exactly 1 year. So on the 3rd of March last year, we launched it, and it's been 1 year. So yeah, that's my intro to start with.
Very good. And we have, thank you very much for participating in this. And one quick question, what time is it there in Mumbai?
And it's 10:20 in the evening, yeah.
Beautiful.
10:20. So I'm at dinner now. So after this chat, I'm going to go for dinner.
Ooh.
So which is going to be nice.
Got me jealous already. Hey, many thanks to Susan. Susan with World Wildlife Day is watching this, and she's announcing a YouTube playlist of videos that she's promoting over the next couple of weeks. And many thanks to Susan for talking up our Hangouts. So if anyone is also a viewer and watching, please, the Q&A app is active, and you can post any comments or questions there, and we'll read them out to the world. Otherwise, comments are welcome on the Google event page as well as the YouTube video. So, this is a quick one-shot chat, an impromptu, extemporaneous conversation about wildlife, and we're not going to hit everything in 60 minutes or less, but please add some relevant links. The highlight for me, yesterday's chat with Bob Payne, he referred to a video at interactive website called Bear 71. And have either of you heard of Bear 71?
I have, but it's something to do with a documentary. I heard about it, but I've not seen it. No.
But you've heard of it? That I never did.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've heard of some people talking about it. Yeah.
Well, we have the link up there on the Planeta Wiki and the Google Hangout, and that's again the kind of stuff we're looking for. What's your? I want to ask you folks, since you're there in person and on the ground where you live, about the physical, natural world. But yeah, we'd love to hear about your favorite podcast, your favorite apps, your favorite websites. Where do you go for information about wildlife? And we'll compile these favorites and add them to the various requisite sites on the social web. One of the big topics of wildlife tourism, of Wildlife Day, is wildlife trafficking and the illegal consumption of wildlife. And the idea being that if you reduce demand, that the pressures on these creatures will be lessened. And I would have to say I get on board that. You can't really disagree with it. But my question is, well, are we doing anything unconsciously? If anyone says, would you like this rhino horn? I know my proper response will be, no, I do not want this rhino horn. But am I consuming anything else? One of the interesting stories in the past couple of weeks came out basically talking about the inadvertent destruction of the natural world thanks to microbeads. Those are those little bits of plastic that you find often in facial scrubs. So, if you could have this, deluxe eco lodge doing all the great things with energy or all the great things with water consumption, but they're offering the guest really what is one of the cosmetics du jour, these facial scrubs with microbeads, which then go into the ocean and kill the coral. What are your thoughts? What are we doing wrong? What should we be doing better? Are we doing anything inadvertently or unconsciously that, hey, we can wake up and do something better now?
I think I'll start with this. Definitely start with this. I think, yeah, you've got a good point, especially with talking about. I think I'll look at it from a tourism consumption point of view, more in lines to. I think we talk about being green, being energy efficient. We talk about how hotels have to go green to the green pathway or whatever, so-called sustainability aspects, and I think it's all interlinked. Anthropology to zoology, or maybe looking into environmental degradation to wildlife management to wildlife conservation itself. So it's like you form a triangle, and you go into hotels where, especially in countries like India, I would give examples. Go into countries which are, especially in habitats which are dry deciduous habitats, but you've got these plastic bottles served out there, which because you can't water to drink has to be so-called clean. You can't drink straight from the taps out here. So how do you work around giving clean water? And you've got this whole amount. The hotel people would say, and I spoke to the people from the hotel, and they said we consume at least about 100 to 150 plastic bottles a day. And that you add up for 30 days. So how do you dispose that of? What do you do? They gave an example, and I've seen that hotel. I won't name names, where there is a wall that a person has created in the hotel, which has plastic bottle wall, and they basically have put mud into it, and they've created that because they have to recycle it. You can't recycle plastic. So yeah, there are ways to it, but I think you're right. I think we talk about being responsible on one side, but on the other side, there's a massive gap, and then that actually would affect the environment, that would affect species, and then that would indirectly help affect humans. So I think it's that cycle which is there, and I don't know. I think that's from a tourism consumption point of view, that's really, really sad. And I think industry, or that's where I am in the wilderness travel industry, we need to start waking up and trying to come up with ways that can actually help habitats where these so-called structures are working.
Thank you. Martin?
Ron, I believe it's a question of awareness. You and I had this conversation the other night about which tourism products are worth seeing and which are not worth seeing, which are ethical and which are not worth ethical, and which are not ethical. The consumer still doesn't know what questions to ask. And forgive me, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm pointing those as much back at myself as I am out at everybody else when I talk about the consumer. Because, for instance, I surf, or I used to surf, and I'm still quite fanatical about collecting surfboards. But it was only in recent years that I discovered the environmental impact of making surfboards. So now if I buy a new board, I'll look to buy a board that's made out of wood and comes from sustainable harvesting, because I've learned that. So I'm using myself as an example, which in science is never a good thing, but I think in consumerism is probably a good thing. We need more education. We need more Ron Marders of the world going out there and bringing these messages across. Being vegan, it's all really hip and everything, but I believe a big part of the vegan diet is quinoa, and I understand that the people who originally had quinoa as a crop are unable now to afford it because they are peasant farmers, and it's now being sold at such high prices that nothing's available to them in that part of South America. You'll know better than I where they live. It's not available because it's all being sold on the international market. So it's nice and good to be vegan, but you need to inform yourself. It's a very, very difficult question because everything is so nuanced when it comes to consumption. Whether it's consumption of experiences or consumption of products.
Well, beautiful. And it gives me a chance to promote the Quinoa Wiki. So we do have the Quinoa page on the Planeta Wiki, and it does go into the initial claims that farmers were unable to afford this now skyrocketing quinoa, and other people and other reports that dispute that. I have yet to have a hangout with quinoa producers, so I'm still kind of on the fence on this one. But
I said.
And it goes into that one of their chestnut that Martin and I share is a lot of storytelling, and the question is, well, what story are we going to tell? And there is the cycle of talking about the wonders of quinoa, and oops, there could be a downside in how farmers are treated. We need, and the sad fact is that we really don't have the avenues for continual storytelling about rural agriculture in Bolivia. And we should be working on that and making that better, because if we can find the story that fleshes out these nuances, then I think we're going to do better. But it doesn't boil down into the 10-second soundbite. It doesn't fit the style of the press, whether the press is left-leaning progressive or right-wing conservative. Each one kind of keeps their storytelling milieu into a little box and doesn't really open it up often. So I think we have to explore a little bit more, and those are really excellent questions. Those are really good questions, regarding the production of surfboards, the production of these facial scrubs, the production of quinoa, and the link down the chain. what caught my attention today was, the earlier hangout from the U.S. State Department with a number of international experts and people working in the field. But again, it's not resonating to me since I'm not buying rhino horn. How do I make sense out of these issues of wildlife trafficking in a life in which most part, I'm not, privy to this? And I'll ask you, and I'll ask Abhishek about this. The question I have is for the Western culture and India and China, so different. What should we know about India in terms of the animal products that are consumed? If you aren't frozen.
I've got a horrible feeling he is, Ron.
Well, we'll come back to that later. Darn it. Yeah, I have, they were talking about the Chinese market for these endangered animal products, and I have, where do you even start by trying to understand or empathize with these issues in China?
You made a very interesting point. You made a very interesting point because, and it actually is a bit of a light bulb moment for me because you said I don't consume rhino products. And maybe the problem is that the anti-rhino poaching campaign is run by people who don't consume rhino products. Maybe change best comes from within, or, well, I don't know, it's a very difficult one. We have just in our northern neighbor, Zimbabwe, has just celebrated their dictator's 90 millionth birthday or something. Amongst other things, they slaughtered 2 elephants on a golf course.
Did he really his birthday dinner was a zoo?
Yep, amongst other things, they slaughtered 2 elephants. Now, in a world which is losing its elephants far too to poaching and to habitat destruction, and in a world where we're starting to learn about the social structure of the elephant herds, who does that sort of thing? And it happens, unfortunately, all the time. But it's easy to point fingers at the man that so many of us so seriously love. What about the visitor who goes to the local restaurant here in South Africa? There's one just 120 kilometers away from me. I'm not also going to name names. Where they serve only a buffet. The restaurant serves only a buffet, and the meals are all, and the meat is mostly game meat. So warthog and impala and stuff like that. These are people who are eating it are just people who are out to have a good time. They're not out to rule. Are you there, Ron?
I'm here, and Abhishek is coming back in.
Abhishek coming back, okay.
Yeah.
So the people who are eating... Started again, it's quite a long one. What I'm saying is awareness of the consumption of the products of our local area. The people who are eating at the buffet down the road from me, where most of the meat comes from wild animals, which are shot on hunting farms and game farms, they're not out. They're just out to have a good time. They're not. I mean, they don't think about whether the animals are, how the animals are shot. It's the same with factory farming. People just awareness just isn't there. But once the awareness does come, change comes, which is the point of everything I'm trying to say.
I hear you, and hopefully we'll get Abhishek back. I think the question in my mind is, where do we ask these questions? And if we look at the nuance, the question is, well, what game meat really is sustainable? For a vegetarian, any sort of eating meat would be frowned upon, and I can understand that. But for those of us carnivores that will eat meat, the question is, well, how do I choose? You know, do I go to the grocery store and do I choose wild salmon, or do I choose, you know, some factory salmon? And then if I look at the factory, the question is, well, how is the factory producing this? If I'm on a trip to Sweden and the kind folks at Nuti Sami Siva have reindeer on the menu, you know, that those reindeer are, you know, an integral part of the Sami culture and lifestyle, and are wild, you know, most, you know, in their migrations. All of a sudden, you're going to have a reindeer steak, and I would say sure, because the reindeer are being cared for, and it's the way that the livelihood is sustained. But you know, how do you ask this, and where do you ask this? If I'm in South Africa, my question to you is, well, wait a minute, game meat, you know, is what's wrong with it? If it's endangered game meat, then I can understand that. But again, what's on the menu, and where do we start asking questions about the menu? Abhishek, let's get into. Are you there? Say whatever you want to say before you disappear again.
Don't think he's there. Looks like he's hung.
When he comes back, we have to be quiet and just let him shout.
Yeah.
Oh, good evening, Mumbai. We'd love to hear from you, Mumbai. Come on.
Yeah. Wake up, Mumbai. We're all awake.
So talk to me about game meat and what I shouldn't be ordering.
Do you know, I can't talk, again, I can't talk with any authority about what you shouldn't be ordering. The game meat that people eat, I don't even know, I don't know what kind of, how it's harvested. I don't know anything about it. It is just something that makes me uncomfortable. But I think one of the reasons that it makes me uncomfortable is because I don't understand anything about it. I don't eat meat. I don't eat poultry because I initially didn't eat it even as a child because I don't like the taste and the texture, and as an adult I don't like the way meat is farmed. And however, having said that, as a very young teenager, I went to my uncle's game farm. The story could only come from Africa. And I was sent there to spend some time with the game rangers. The idea was to make a man out of me. I think they failed miserably. But on one of the first days that I was there, I was told to go and shoot an impala, which the game rangers would then take to the neighbor's farm and feed to the neighbor's pet lions. I had that impala probably 30 meters in my sight, and I am not the world's best shot, but I would probably have made a clean shot, and I couldn't pull the trigger. And in the discussion with the game rangers afterwards, they shot him or her, and I went with them to watch it being fed into the lions, which were kept in an enclosure. And in discussion with the game rangers that night, I remember his name very clearly, but I've never seen him again since. He said to me, you know that if you can't kill it, you don't have the right to eat it. And it's a philosophy that I followed the rest of my life. And it's a question that I think every country should ask herself or himself.
Abhishek, go ahead. What did we miss?
Can you hear us?
I can't. I'm sorry. It's totally blank, so I can't.
I guess sending him a message. Can you tell us what was the question?
Sometimes it takes a little bit of a delay. We saw with Abhishek sometimes there's a bit of a delay, but
yeah.
I want to welcome Abhishek if he's able to say something. If not, hey, happy birthday and happy anniversary. This is the 1-year anniversary for Wild Navigator, his company. And I'd love you to tell us some stories about how that's going along and if today's not working, don't worry, we'll schedule another time. And, you know, glitches happen. Um, but I think it's very important that we have good sources of information that connect across cultures. And Abhishek is based there in Scotland and now visiting home in India. And you know, I'd love to hear these stories. But another time, I guess. Tell me the name, Martin, of the little tiny seahorse that Greg was talking about the other day.
I live in a town on the Knysna estuary. The town is called Knysna on the south coast of South Africa. And there is a little seahorse here called the Knysna seahorse. Hippocampus capensis is its logical name, which is really only found in 3 estuaries of the Cape, nowhere else in the world. It is one of the icon species of wildlife here in Knysna. And that is partly because it's cute, and also because it's what's called an indicator species. The health of an indicator species population is an indication of the health of a given habitat. There are very many different types of indicator species. It's a little guy, doesn't get much bigger than maybe 10 centimeters, and really, really exciting to come across them in the lagoon when you're snorkeling on the beds, the beds of lagoon grass. I keep making a mistake of calling it the lagoon. It's an estuary. It's permanently open to the sea, and it's a little mouth.
I think 2015 will be the year that you admit that you learned that you live on an estuary, not in a lagoon system.
Yeah, I have been living on this estuary for 31 years, and for many of those years I was a skipper of ferry boats on the estuary. I will eventually learn how to give it its proper name, I will. The Hippocampus capensis, the Knysna seahorse, is an interesting one because it takes us back to the conversation that you and I and Greg Goft had the other night about how we market wildlife experiences in South Africa. The big thing that we've always done is we've marketed the big 5: lion, a leopard, elephant, rhino, leopard, elephant, rhino, and wildebeest. These are the sort of icon species of the game, the wildlife in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa at least. And I was talking to my teenage son the other day about that, and he said, "Well, why the big 5? Because there's all sorts of other things. I mean, there's elephants, and I mean, there's cheetahs, and there's whales, and there's African fish eagles, which is the sort of iconic sound of Africa. They call it fish. Wow, wow, wow. About it." And I told him that the big 5 were the sort of 5 animals that the great white hunter would set out when they came to Africa in the 19th century, set out to shoot on safari. They would bag big 5, and that would prove how much of a man they are. And he made such an interesting point. He said, well, then perhaps we shouldn't be marketing the big 5 because it's based on a morally questionable way of traveling. It's always difficult to look at the past with the morals of the present, but it is an interesting one because those big white hunters were notorious for shooting huge numbers of animals just for the sport of it. And I believe it happened in the States as well with the what was your plains animal there? Was it the buffalo?
The buffalo.
Yeah. So that makes a very interesting point. That you know you're marketing something based on a questionable morality. Well, but more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but again, nuance. South Africa has it's the only country in the world that has a floristic thing within its own boundaries. all the other countries share their, the flora of other countries is shared. The Boreal Kingdom covers most of Europe and North America, as I said the other day. But within this tiny little Cape Floristic region, which is a strip of the coast along the bottom of Africa, never more than about 100 kilometers wide, there's over 6,000 species of plants alone. And something like 30% of those species are endemic to the area, so they're found nowhere else in the world. That kind of biodiversity, that kind of richness, we should be marketed in the big 50,000 or even the big 50 million.
Well, we're patenting that phrase right now, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to do that would, I believe, go a part of the way towards improving this awareness, this knowledge that I was talking about earlier.
I think so. Well, wait a second. Well said. And I think the question again is how we move forward with our understanding and this awareness. And I would refer you to and the listeners to the Planeta Wiki. We have a brand new page on the Big Five, and we have a wiki page for your favorite fish, and we have a wiki page. We can go into depth on this, and we should see how much we can grow these pages. And as a challenge, I'd say, to what degree can we embed the wildlife knowledge on the wiki before World Environment Day, June 5th. But beyond that, the question I ask is this: can we find some examples? Can we find some examples of local communities and tourism destinations, places that receive visitors? Can we issue a challenge and say, all right, give us a local biodiversity explainer. What are the indicator species? What are the birds? What is the local wildlife? When is da-da-da-da-da? And to really look for, some good case examples. Because, frankly, when we talk about wildlife and places, it's very difficult for the visitor to get any sort of information that's kind of geared at the casual visitor. There are plenty of academic articles out there. There are plenty of scholarly research tomes about the most minute species. But the question I ask is, do we see this in the popular literature, and that explains to people? It'd be interesting to be able to, do a top 10 count of what cities and what countries are showing off their wildlife in this responsible way. Go ahead, show us.
Popular literature is a very important point. And we were talking earlier about the coelacanth, and the man who identified it for science, Professor J.L.B. Smith, who was a professor of chemistry and then a professor of ichthyology at the University of Grahamstown, which is the one of the closest university towns to where I live. Prof. Smith had a very interesting philosophy. He was a very prolific writer. He produced a number of works like The Sea Fishes of Southern Africa, which is the seminal work, the book for all the fishes. But he produced almost more popular books and more popular articles than scientific papers. And he was quite clear about this. The taxpayer paid his salaries and paid for his research and paid for him to enjoy doing what he did. And he felt it was only fair to share that by making science accessible to the taxpayer. And that's why he wrote so many books. His most famous book was called Old Forex, in which he described his how the coelacanth first came to his knowledge, the living coelacanth, because at the time it was found, people thought it was only known from fossils, and people thought it had died out 65 million years ago. And the coelacanth was caught in a fishing trawler net off the coast of East London, here in South Africa, about 600 kilometers from where I lived. And then he was in Knysna at the time. Transport between the two was very poor, and so were communications. It was Christmas time. In those days, the communications, everything used to shut down at Christmas time in South Africa. It took him 6 weeks to get to see the animal. And when he finally did get it, was preserved by the curator of the East London Museum, a woman by the name of Marjorie Courtney Latimer, and hence the name Latimeria chalumni. Latimeria from Courtney Latimer, and Chalumni after the Chalumna River, which was found off the Chalumna River mouth, which is in East London.
Martin, can I ask you for a favor? 1 second. Can you switch pages and show us the coelacanth wiki page?
Okay, I'm going to have to change. Well, the page that I'm showing you at the moment is my Facebook page. I'm going to have to switch off my screen share and share my whole screen.
Or actually, all you would need to do is insert the Planeta Wiki link where you had the Facebook link.
Because it was only showing. I thought it was only showing Facebook. Oops. Okay.
That's okay. Then you switch from the you manually switch it.
Okay.
Hey, by the way, do you have a Chromecast in South Africa?
I don't know.
It's that little widget, that little I want to say doodle, but that's not right. Dongle that you put into your TV that can stream the video onto the big screen. It's called a Chromecast.
I heard that word, I think, for the first time today. I think you used it earlier while we were in the group.
Yeah, I was doing it with the State Department. All right, let's go back to your...
Here we are, coelacanth. It's my screen shared. I'm searching for coelacanth. So there's the planetic page, coelacanth. There you go. What a beautiful animal. And look here. Watch it swim. This is, I mean, to me, it's like
a ballet.
It's a one fish ballet. I look at that. Isn't it beautiful? Don't you just want them to live forever?
The underwater fan dance.
That's exactly what it is. The veils, yeah. So, Smith wrote a book about the discovery of the coelacanth, and it became an international bestseller, Old Four Legs. And I was saying earlier that I'm very, very tenuous connection there, because when I first came to live in Knysna, I rented the house that used to be his, from his family. Mm-hmm. And when I lived there, all the magazines that he collected over the years and his books were still in the house. And I had many, many happy hours reading stuff that I knew he had read when he was on holiday and on his research trips here in South Africa. And screen share off. As I said, I've written quite a lot about the coelacanth, and this is a little booklet that I wrote for the Featherbed Nature Reserve.
Ferry boats and fossil fish?
Ferry boats and fossil fish, yeah. The Featherbed Nature Reserve in Knysna is our biggest attraction, commercial attraction in our town. It's on the Western Headland. It's a nature reserve of about 160 hectares, and they do 3 and 4 hour tours of the reserve, walking through the fynbos and the coastal thicket, and luncheon. Ferries on the Knysna Lagoon, the Knysna Estuary. So Smith's family, it was Smith's son particularly, William, went ahead, and many years after the old man's death, he turned that into what I think is quite a remarkable product. It's an interactive way of meeting the environment, the landscape of Knysna, the natural landscape of Knysna in a very short period. 3 hours. And that was a souvenir book that I wrote for him. I wrote for them about him, amongst other things, and his coelacanth story. But this, you asked earlier if the coelacanth is endangered, and I said I don't know, but I think it is. But I think the coelacanth is kind of a species that gives us pause. It helps us, I think, to not confine, to narrow down our thinking about how much we know about the natural world. Like I said earlier, we thought it was dead for 65 million years, and it turned up in a fishing net off the coast of South Africa in 1938. And it's been, many more have been found ever since.
Just speak to the idea that you're preferring to use the term natural world instead of environment these days.
I read a very interesting thing in the Telegraph yesterday. When we finished this Hangout, I'll put a link in the, as John Green calls it, the doobly-doo. A beautiful piece about our relationship between the relationship between language and landscape, and in that piece there was a quote from George Monbiot in which he said that the word environment is part of the reason that we're losing, we're losing the battle to teach consumers is because it's too much of a clinical scientific word. He prefers words like the natural world. Suddenly, I mean, I immediately agreed when I read with that. I immediately agreed with him when I read that. I think that the way we talk is very important.
Sure, yeah, and that's why, you know, that's why, for example, Planeta and Planeta Wiki use natural world as a subhead instead of environment. We have natural world and cultural world, and you know, yay for the times that those worlds intersect. But if we're not, you know, figuring out ways of rephrasing and, you know, looking for the language that works with people, of course it's so technical. I mean, can anyone really explain the IUCN Red List? Or can anyone explain CITES? And we have to find a way of, you know, getting these institutions to understand that much of the language that they're using by default is simply off-putting, and we're not making that connection.
I am guilty of it myself. The definition of jargon, it's dense language, obfuscation, which is designed to be accessible only to the people in the know. It's exclusionary. Jargon is exclusionary. It has to be. That's what That's what jargon is. So, if you can translate science into English and get people to read it, you've won. And then I think we'll get major change. But there's also this question of whether or not it impacts on you. Today, the 3rd of March, Cape Town recorded its highest ever temperature in 100 years of keeping records. And it is also in the grip of massive wildfires. One of the big hotels, one of the beautiful hotels, was burnt to the ground. Massive areas, because Cape Town is built around the Table Mountain National Park, massive areas of the national park, and Table Mountains, not Table Mountain itself, but the mountains south of Table Mountain, have been burnt to the ground. The vegetation has been burnt to the ground, and really badly, not just the normal, what we call veldfire or bushfire. And the people in Cape Town are really beginning to be affected now, and in South Africa as well, because everybody, not everybody, but lots of people in South Africa really hold Cape Town in special special esteem. So people are being affected by global warming, the effects of maybe injudicious fire management, maybe not, but certainly probably recklessness. And so this afternoon on Facebook or Twitter, something started to kind of trend. There's a picture of a woman's of the back end of a car, and a description that the woman who was driving the car had thrown a lit cigarette stub out. Can you believe that somebody would do that? This was in Cape Town. So people are directly affected, so they started to think more about what they're doing. So awareness starts to grow. But unfortunately, we can't let the world die because people aren't aware. We have to continue with our education, our advocacy, our campaigns to try and protect the world.
You know, it's interesting. We are going to focus on the idea and the concept of awareness. Too often, if you watch the official Hangout this morning from the State Department, too much of it is kind of a top-down campaign, and that only works if the folks at the bottom are kind of reaching up, and that there's kind of a grasp of the two. You know, if it's grassroots communication meets top-down, then I think we have some success. But we have to, you know, make it relevant and make it make sense. And I think one way of doing this for World Wildlife Day is, again, asking ourselves, you know, what do we know about the local wildlife? You know, can we even name the local bird songs? Can we identify the trees in the city parks? Nearby, what are the animals that are also residents of the bioregions where we live? And if we don't easily know these answers, then I say let's challenge ourselves to learn and to document this. And you know, we have a long ways to go, because unfortunately a lot of people tend to assume that if you don't have the information, if you don't have the answers to this, then people aren't doing their job. No, we have a changing awareness, a changing consciousness, and it's not all headed one direction. It's a very much a multi-directional focus here. All right, fine. Let's see what we're doing, and let's see how we can collaborate and do good things with one another. So that said, and going back to the wiki, and I wanted to get you to show that page because, Martin, you know, hands down, you've brought South African wildlife and biosphere reserves and to life here on the wiki. So I want to thank you personally for enlightening myself.
Thank you. Ron, I think we are a bit of approaching our time. I know I unfortunately have other things. Can I suggest that we end off on this? I will tell you a little bit about a local tree, a local animal, and a local bird in Knysna in South Africa. Can you do the same for me in the town where you live in Nevada?
Not during this hangout, but later on I'll record it.
Okay. I'll kick out. I'll tell you then. We have the tree, the yellowwood tree, Podocarpus latifolius and Podocarpus. Now I've caught myself out. There's two yellowwood trees in our area. They're soft wood trees. They're relatives of the pines. Beautiful trees that, particularly the oprechtig yellowwood, which is the upright yellowwood or the real yellowwood, which is the one in the forests of Knysna which grows above the canopy. You have these massive trees growing above the canopy, hung with Spanish moss. Well, our version of Spanish moss, which is actually a lichen. It was and still is very sought after for furniture making. But in the 19th century, it was felled by the millions for lumber for railway sleepers. And then they discovered that it wasn't very suitable for railway sleepers. The forest of Neisner, we've got about 65,000 hectares left. It must have been about 250,000 hectares at the beginning of the 19th century. So they're protected. Animals, we have a problem animal here for us in the house where I live in. I live on the edge of an area of a natural area, a tiny little house but surrounded by trees. But our suburb has been invaded by baboons because the natural area behind us has been developed, and with the building, there's a buffer between the two, between us and the new suburbs, and they're not all that new. I mean, over 10 years old. But the animals' habitat has been confined, so they've learned that they can find they've found they can find stuff to eat in our area, and I have barred my windows and doors, not so much because of security, but to keep the baboons out of the house because they're a problem. And then the kind of iconic bird of Neisner is the Neisner lory, which is
Louis?
Lory, spelled L-O-E-R-I-E, but pronounce it lure like in fishing, lure-e, lory. It's a bird about the size of a large dove. Bright crimson red underwings, same color as my shirt, but green on top. Very beautiful bird with a very, very ugly call, but still a very evocative call, and confined largely to the forests, but also now quite common in the urban areas, especially where there's fruit, because it's a fruit-eating bird. And I will put something about those three onto the wiki at some stage.
We have a Neisner page.
Yeah.
Hey, quick shout out and thanks to the INTO Secretariat for tweeting about World Wildlife Day and thanking me for retweets and tweets. Great to have you on board. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday with Rhonda Green and Bob Payne, who I both recommended that they watch the video that you and Greg and I recorded last week about the Big 50,000. Rhonda made a very strong case that Big Five is just kind of a idiotic way of promoting wildlife tourism when it was based on that hunting ethos that has since people are hunting, but they're certainly not going after the Big Five.
You made that point?
Sorry?
You made that point?
Of course.
Oh, wonderful. You'll give us the link?
I will. It's our previous Hangout. I don't know if you're subscribed to our Hangout list, but it's right. It's the one right before this one. But I'll make sure the link is posted. And if you look at the Wildlife Wiki page on the Planeta Wiki, we have links to both of our videos as well as the other videos. Speaking of other videos, U.S. Fish and Wildlife is hosting their online webcast. I'm hoping it's archived, and it will be about wildlife crime and figuring out how to CSI it, detect who did what. So, and that'll start in 20 minutes on the web. Not a hangout, but a live conversation. And one of the points I made to Rhonda and Bob is all right, I can understand that public awareness of World Wildlife Day is really, frankly, fairly low. But it's only the second year of this official celebration. And in the second year, last week we did the Hangouts, and this year it's at least tripled the number of online, video chats and conversations about this, and other events are percolating and taking place. So great. I feel very optimistic about this. I want to thank you, Martin, for, as I say, educating me about the biodiversity there in Neisner and in this floral kingdom. I appreciate the idea that you can be patient with me as I keep on trying to hammer at you and others in South Africa. Explain to me a floral kingdom. When I had the good fortune of visiting Cape Town and they were talking about the floral kingdom, again, having researched the topic, having looked at some of this beforehand, that's completely floored me. I mean, it's like, what? I just don't, I understand it now, and please take a look at our relevant pages, but, we have to make ways of explaining this to the general audience in a way that doesn't bore and stupefy them, but rather engages and enlightens. And this work will never, this week work will continue to be growing as we make, this type of science more popular. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for the opportunities that you give us with these Hangouts.
Just one of many, folks. We will wrap up our Hangout here, folks, and look forward to seeing you next March 3rd, 2016, 365 days away, for our 3rd annual World Wildlife Day Hangout-a-thon. Meanwhile, Martin and Greg and I are having a conversation next week, next Monday, and we'll be trying to do a series of Monday Hangouts on conservation and wildlife tourism in Southern Africa. And again, it continues to grow. Martin, show us that book one last time.
I'm so proud of it. It's a wonderful gift from a wonderful family, and a man who did, and a woman, because his wife was also a formidable scientist, Margaret Mary Smith. Wonderful people who did wonderful science and did a lot for making science accessible to the lay people.
Well, on behalf of lay people everywhere, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
We'll be back later for more Hangouts, and meanwhile, have a great day and have a great week, and go outside and don't disturb the wildlife.